Late at night, my 9-year-old grandson showed up at our doorstep unexpectedly. I rushed to open the door and found him barefoot, with blood oozing from his toes. He was tightly holding the hand of his 4-year-old sister, whose face was streaked with tears. "Did you two really walk here all by yourselves?" I asked in disbelief. They nodded, and I quickly ushered them inside. However, when my husband woke up, he was furious. "Absolutely not," he yelled, his terrifying expression making the grandchildren burst into tears. I was bewildered. Surely they could have stayed for just one night. But then I couldn't believe what my husband did next. "My name is Margaret. I'm a 63-year-old homemaker living with my husband Patrick, who is 2 years older than me. He worked as a high school teacher until he retired at 60. We have 2 children who are married and independent. Our daughter Laura lives in a nearby apartment while our son Richard lives in the neighboring town. Richard's wife, Victoria, is stunningly beautiful, with translucent white skin and big eyes that make anyone falter under her gaze. She's an ideal daughter-in-law as long as she remains silent. However, she has a sharp tongue. Everyone wonders why a woman of my caliber would marry a man like him, she often boasts. Are you saying Richard isn't up to your standard? I once asked. Well, he works for a top-tier company and earns a decent income, but let's be honest, he's not that good-looking. But I'm not that picky, so he's lucky, I guess. I felt very angry hearing her speak ill of my son. Who does she think she is? I wanted to say something, but I held my tongue to avoid a confrontation. However, my husband couldn't remain silent. Richard sure married quite an impressive wife, didn't he? He remarked sarcastically. Victoria seemed unfazed and smirked dismissively. Richard, in response, could only manage a wry smile. Victoria is too good for me. Seeing this, I imagined my kind-hearted son must be facing some challenges in his marriage. Despite their differences, they had a child together. Daniel, our first grandchild, resembled his mother, with a remarkably beautiful face, yet inherited his father's kind personality, a perfect blend of both parents' best qualities. I always looked forward to Richard bringing Daniel over to our house. Victoria rarely visited, which might have been for the best. 5 years later, we welcomed a granddaughter, Emily. She was an adorable girl with fair skin, chubby cheeks, and round eyes. However, when I visited my son's home to celebrate her birth, Victoria disdainfully glared at the newborn. Daniel takes after me and is beautiful, but why is this one so chubby and ugly? Who does she even resemble? She's not cute at all. You're a mother. Don't say such things. She's perfectly cute just as she is, I retorted. I can say whatever I want about my own child. Are you trying to start trouble with me? I won't lose to an old hag like you. As my husband heard this exchange beside me, his expression changed. I could tell he was about to shout in my defense, so I quickly intervened. Instead, it was our son who raised his voice in anger. Victoria, enough. Mom and Dad came here to celebrate. There's a limit to how rude you can be. Oh, how unusual for you to stand up to me, she sneered, glaring sharply at Richard, as if ready to strike. I quickly relented. I'm sorry, Victoria. You've just given birth, and it's a stressful time. I shouldn't have said that. I apologize. Please forgive me. Humph, exactly. You shouldn't have said anything. You could have just sent a gift instead of coming all the way here, Victoria replied, her demeanor consistently lacking manners. I couldn't say anything further. Because of incidents like these, we grew distant. Despite this, Richard continued to bring Daniel and Emily over regularly, which made us happy. However, there were still some concerns on my mind. Daniel was bright and talkative, but Emily, even at ages 3 and 4, showed hardly any signs of speaking. Furthermore, her once fair skin had turned extremely dark from sunburn, and her hands were rough and dry. When I asked Richard about Emily's condition, he said, Victoria claims Emily loves playing in the garden. But the state of our granddaughter's skin was still extremely concerning. Then one day, our family was struck by tragedy. Richard suddenly passed away. He fell from the stairs of a pedestrian bridge during his commute. Though he was rushed to the hospital and received intensive treatment, he didn't make it. I was in such shock that I could hardly stand. Richard, you poor thing. It must have been painful, I murmured as tears streamed down my face. Daniel cried uncontrollably, shouting, Daddy, Daddy. What's wrong? Wake up, meanwhile. Emily stood expressionless, biting her lip. Victoria, without shedding a tear, continued to fiddle with her phone. Looking back, it was a peculiar scene, but at that moment, I was too overwhelmed with grief to notice anything else. My husband received Richard's old, worn-out bag from the paramedics, which had been found beneath the pedestrian bridge. It was the bag I had bought him when he first started working. He'd been saving and working hard for his family, and thinking about this made everything even harder to bear. The wake and funeral were mainly organized by our daughter's husband and were carried out smoothly. I spent the entire time in a daze at home. Then, the night after the funeral, the intercom rang. Wondering what was happening, I looked at the camera and saw Daniel's face, biting his lip. I hurriedly opened the door and let him in. Holding back his tears, Daniel managed to speak in a shaky voice. "Mom told us to leave. Can we stay just for tonight?" My grandson was barefoot and blood was oozing from his toes. "Did you two walk here all by yourselves?" I asked, horrified. The grandchildren nodded, but it was a 10-minute drive from the neighboring town. While 9-year-old Daniel might manage the walk, Emily was only 4 years old. Besides, it was the middle of the night. They must have been terrified. As I let them into the living room, my husband awoke. I consulted my husband about Daniel's request to stay just for the night. "Grandpa, we'll leave tomorrow." "Please?" Daniel pleaded. "Absolutely not," my husband replied, his brow furrowed with worry. Upon seeing his stern expression, the grandchildren burst into tears, and I was wide-eyed with surprise. "Can't we at least let them stay for one night?" I began to plead, but then my husband hugged the children tightly, sobbing uncontrollably. Even during our son's funeral, he had held back tears. We had been married for 30 years, yet this was the first time I had seen him cry like this. "Don't say just for today. Stay here forever. Poor things," he said through his tears. His words revealed the depth of his feelings, and I couldn't stop crying either. Later, I asked the grandchildren what had happened, and what they shared was shocking. Victoria, who was supposed to be a homemaker, was often out during the day, leaving the children home alone. Even when she was home, she would frequently scold and roughly push Emily around for various reasons. Whenever Emily cried, Victoria would shout angrily, "Shut up. Be quiet. You're annoying." Over time, Emily learned to cry silently without making a sound. Daniel said he was often scolded too when he tried to defend his younger sister. He felt sorry for Emily, who didn't have the option of escaping their mother's behavior by going to school like he did. Emily wasn't allowed to attend kindergarten. Apparently, while her mother was around, Emily would go outside to weed the garden every day. This was her way to avoid being scolded and perhaps earn some praise from Victoria. This explained why her skin was deeply tanned and her hands were rough. Emily's inability to speak might stem from a fear of being scolded. Thinking about this filled me with a sense of helplessness. That evening, Victoria had apparently told them that guests were coming and ordered them to go outside. Daniel managed to put on his shoes, but Emily couldn't make it in time and was left barefoot. Victoria quickly locked the front door behind them. Daniel then put his shoes on Emily's feet and held her hand as they walked to our house to seek help. "What a terrible thing to do," I said, shaking my head. "Unbelievable." I tried calling my daughter-in-law several times but couldn't reach her. Since it was late, I decided to sleep with my grandchildren that night. However, early in the morning, Daniel woke me up. "Grandma, I'm sorry for waking you up," he said. "Emily said she saw Dad in her dream." "Huh? Did she?" "Yes. Dad told Emily to look inside the bag." I was taken aback by what he said, but looking at Daniel's serious expression, I started to wonder if there was something more to it. I woke up my husband and told him what Daniel had said. Still groggy, my husband was skeptical at first, but when he checked our son's bag, he exclaimed in surprise, "No way. This is outrageous. I can't forgive this." Filled with anger, we decided to take action. We quickly called our eldest daughter, Laura, who lives nearby, and asked her to come over to take care of the grandchildren. Meanwhile, my husband and I rushed to our son's house and rang the doorbell repeatedly, but no one answered. We continued to ring the doorbell persistently until my daughter-in-law finally appeared in her pajamas, looking disheveled with her collar open. "Geez, so noisy. Who the hell is it?" she snapped. At that moment, I caught a fleeting glimpse of a young man with brown hair crossing the back of the room, completely naked. I knew it. However, as soon as my daughter-in-law realized it was us, she widened her eyes and quickly shut the door. "It's so rude of you to come here suddenly. Go home," she shouted aggressively from behind the door. "We have something urgent to discuss. Please open the door," I insisted. "I can't open it right now," she replied. Reluctantly, I opened the door with the key. Inside my son's bag, I found shocking evidence. As I rummaged through it, the young man from earlier exclaimed, "Oh no, run." He hurriedly dressed and fled from the house. At the entrance, Victoria stood defiantly, glaring at me and my husband without a trace of remorse. "What the heck are you doing here? Are you already cheating on your husband the day after he passed away? Don't be ridiculous." "Oh, he's just a gas repairman," she said, trying to dismiss my accusation. "Huh, so gas repairmen these days work without clothes on," I replied sarcastically. Victoria noticed my sarcasm and clicked her tongue in annoyance. She may have a beautiful face, but her ugly character shows through in her expression. "Richard is gone now, and I'm done with you both. You have no right to say anything. Just leave." At that moment, my husband, his face flushed red with anger, deliberately asked her, "I can't see the grandchildren. Where are they?" He pretended to search around the house. Victoria seemed momentarily at a loss for words, but quickly started shouting angrily at me. "They went to a friend's house. What's wrong with that?" "Stop lying. Were you not worried when a 9-year-old and a 4-year-old were gone all night? Are you even a mother?" "Huh? How do you know about that?" "They walked all the way to our house late at night." As I told this to her, she looked puzzled and astonished, then shamelessly responded with a brazen attitude, "Our daughter isn't cute at all, and the son I raised lovingly rebels against me. I don't need those brats. You can take them, but give me money. I want $100,000. It's not much, right?" She truly was the worst kind of woman. I felt boiling anger at the thought that my son and grandchildren had suffered because of such a woman. "Too bad you can't spend money behind bars. I've recorded our entire conversation," I said, revealing my phone. "Huh, you're so naive. I'll be released soon enough just for being a little harsh with the children." "It's not just about the children. You do realize that taking someone's life is a serious crime, don't you? And there's evidence." Actually, Richard's diary was in the bag. From Victoria's frequent outings, he suspected she was having an affair. On top of that, there was a report from a detective Richard had hired to investigate. According to it, his wife was indeed cheating with a young man she had met at a pub, the same man who fled from the house. Additionally, the diary mentioned, "I've been feeling my life is in danger." It seems Richard had experienced several incidents where he narrowly avoided accidents, such as almost being hit by a car while walking or nearly being pushed onto train tracks while on a platform. He suspected his wife was targeting him and had taken precautions and was preparing for divorce. That might prove my affair, but it doesn't prove I killed Richard. It's just the ramblings of old people. The police have more important things to do. "Can you still say that after hearing this?" I argued. My husband appeared holding a surveillance camera he had found. The day before Richard passed away, he had installed a surveillance camera in the living room, as noted in his diary. Upon playing the recording, we heard a conversation between Victoria and the young man. It went well this time. I pushed your husband hard down the stairs. "Thank you. Now we'll get a hefty life insurance payout." Victoria turned pale, her lips trembling uncontrollably. I had just said that as a joke. How far can you go with your lies? "I'll bring all the evidence to the police and request a reinvestigation. Your affair partner might spill everything about you during questioning." Oh, by the way, Laura mentioned something. The place where Richard fell is a busy pedestrian bridge, and many cars nowadays have cameras installed. Laura suggested spreading the word on social media to see if there were any witnesses. At that time, Victoria's eyes widened and she looked visibly shaken, placing a hand over her mouth. However, she quickly changed her tone and began to apologize. I'm sorry. I was threatened by that man. I'll give you half of the $100,000 life insurance payout if you overlook this." "Excuse me? You're not the beneficiary." "That can't be true. We made each other beneficiaries when we got married." I told her that, according to Richard's diary, the beneficiary had been changed from her to Daniel. Richard had set up a trust system that allowed his children to receive the benefits once they reached a certain age, regardless of their current age. "That's ridiculous. It was a plan to get a large sum of money." She collapsed on the spot, crying and screaming like a child, utterly miserable. We watched her coldly in silence. Afterward, both she and her lover were arrested. Taking someone's life is a serious crime, and they are unlikely to be free for a long time. Even if they were to leave prison, no one would want anything to do with them. Currently, my grandchildren live with me. In fact, my daughter and her husband also live with us, supporting us and lovingly caring for the two children as if they were their own. Emily, who used to be quiet, has started to open up and gradually began to talk more. I am determined to stay strong and see these children's happiness through until the end.